Hello guys, welcome once more again to the Dot Crash Course, and today we're going to be talking about control flow statements. Okay, so in the previous chapter we covered functions, what were functions, how do we use, and the block of codes. All right, so today we're going to be talking about control flow. So what is control flow, or what are control flow statements basically? So these control flow statements in any programming language, right? Because I think almost all programming languages implement them the same. Allows you to change the flow of your application, right? So a basic example, maybe for example, if you could get a user's age, and based on that you wanted to display specific messages for a particular age, then you can go ahead and use control flow statements. And the basic ones we have are the if, the else block, and I guess you're kind of like familiar with them. So basically, like I explained, they allow the flow of your application to be changed, right, based on certain condition or on a certain condition or conditions, all dependent on basically what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so we are going to do the usual. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and create a folder for that, and we're going to say control flow. Okay, and I think I should kind of like zoom in so those who are on mobile devices can also get to view the course properly. I guess this should be a zoom level. Okay, and we are going to start with example one as usual. Example one dot dot. Okay, let me remove this out, and I think for now let me open that in the terminal. Okay, that's great, and let me remove this. So now, the first example we are going to start with is something maybe very basic, okay, not too complex, and as we are evolving, we'll be trying to see how we can get basic understanding of that. So we're going to start with saying const, sorry if I can't spell, const your fruits, okay, your fruits. Let's say we have an apple, okay, not apple, and my fruits, okay, and for that I think I'll take a grape. Okay, so now with the control flow statements we have the basic that at this you should be familiar with, which is the if else statement. Okay, now with the if else statement it helps us to do comparison, okay, in which the conditions to be executed have to return a boolean, okay, either true or false. Okay, and now based on that condition we can do certain executions. So let's kind of like put that here in the code and see what we get. So we are going to say if, okay, let me just, so you have the if, remember the if is a keyword, okay, it's one of the keywords that uses, so we can use if as a variable, right, a variable name, so we can't use that. So that's if with the keyword, and then we have two parentheses, okay, two parentheses open and a curly brackets. So we're going to say your fruit, okay, and we're going to check if your fruit is equals to my fruit, okay. Then we are just going to print something very basic and say, hey, we have the same fruits, oh, the same fruit, yeah. So and then we go to the else block, okay. Oh, before even going to the else block, we could provide an else if. Now the else if is just so that should in case the first condition isn't met or doesn't evaluate to true, then we go down to the next block of code. So in the next block of code, next condition we could try saying if your fruit is equals to an apple, and nope, not that, and my fruit is equals to a grape, okay. Then we could print down here what can we say? We have, no, we could say you have an apple, okay, let's just go with something like that, and I have a grape, okay. So we have that, and then oh, there's a mistype here, thank you. Okay, and now we are now going to provide an else case. Now the else case is such that if all of these conditions being evaluated here don't evaluate to true, right, then we have a fallback case, right? This fallback case is just always good to implement, so that should in case none of your conditions are evaluated to true or none of your conditions match, then you can have something like a default output, okay, or a default statement. So we can just put something here as that else we have different fruits. Let's just put something like that, okay. We have different fruits or something like that, okay. So now let's try to run this out, and then let's see what we get. So I guess it should be visible enough, and we're going to say that example one the dart. Okay, so you see now we have you have an apple and I have a grape, right? Because here in this first case we your fruit and my fruits are different, right? So the condition doesn't evaluate to true. Actually, this is a false. Now since this is false, that understands that it needs to go and check the next condition, or the next let's call it block of code, right, to see if it evaluates to true. The now since it comes here, okay, it comes to the else if, and it says that okay, your fruit is apple and my fruit is grape, then it gets now inside this block of code. Remember when we're talking about functions, right, we said anything in between these curly braces is just executed, or it's like only within that function, right? It can get called or it can pass that, okay. So we have then this print function which is being executed down here, okay. So and then it just gets the print, okay, you have an apple and I have a grape, and then it exits, right? It doesn't like continue to the next block of code, which is actually the S block, okay, right? Because the way these control statements are implemented is that, okay, for example, if this condition is met for the if else, if this condition is met, then just execute it and then get out of the loop, okay, or break out of the loop. It's basically it. So we that already explains. We are now going to jump to example 2. Okay, so we have here example 2, the dart. So we are going to have that, the usual, and I'm going to bring this down. Okay, so now we are going to talk about the for loop. Well, let me just use the traditional for loops, because we also have a modern for loop, right? So but let's first of all get to understand what the traditional for loop is all about. So for the traditional for loops, we have basically 3 parts, okay, whereby the first part is where the loop starts from, right? Starting, if I could use the word, maybe starting condition, okay. And the second part is the condition where the loop has to stop, because if we don't provide a stopping condition, then obviously we're going to have an infinite loop, right? We're going to have an infinite loop running forever and ever, and that might cause your machine to crash, which of course we don't want, and which also isn't good for maybe the application that you're trying to work on. So that would be that. So you need to have a stopping condition. Now for the third part, we're also going to have should I call it an increment condition? Yeah, let's put it like that. Okay, excuse me the word, but that's how I'm going to explain. So what do I actually mean by that? So basically what I mean by that is the increment condition is just there to tell the for loop how should it move, right? So for example, we're going to get into the coding part, okay. So say for example we have like an array of numbers or a list of numbers, right? And let's say we have like 5 numbers. So if we want to print each and every number one after the other, we will have to go by an increment like of 1, right? So it's like we're taking 1 step. But if we say increment by 2, it means if we start at position 0, we need to jump 2 steps ahead of us, okay. So that's just what the increment steps, that's just what the increment, if I should say condition, okay, the increment condition actually means. So without further ado, let's kind of like dive into the code, and let's see that in action. So I'm still going to go with fruits, okay. I don't know why I just kind of like the fruits so much. So we're going to have an apple, we're going to have some grapes, okay. we're going to have some oranges or an orange, and I don't know which other food can we kind of like go with. Maybe just the mango. I hope you kind of like know what is the mango. Okay, so um, so I'm going to explain now the structure of the for loop. So we start with the for. Okay, a for it's a keyword also, peculiar to that or any programming language. Okay, it's a keyword, a reserved word that we can't use, right? For variable assignment. So let me just be brief on that. And like we said, right, we have our starting condition, which actually we could say var. Okay, I is equals to 0. And also one thing I forgot to mention is that each of these conditions are separated by a semicolon, right? So let's just go ahead. As we're going ahead, I'm going to explain that. So we have the first saying var. Okay, we have I, which is we are assigning it a value of 0. Okay, this I could basically be anything, and you see, yes, that was able to infer the value to be int. Okay, so we could say index, or we could give it any starting name, but it's kind of like a good practice to go with I, except maybe you want to use something else, but a good practice is always to go with I. Okay, so we have that, and we separate this by the semicolon, which I talked of earlier, and now we have stopping condition. Okay, so we're going to say as far as I is less than fruits, so we're going to say fruits dot, if I can spell, fruits dot length. Okay, and now our increment condition, if I can put it like that, so which we are going to say increment I by 1. This is the meaning of this plus plus. Okay, it means get the value of I. Okay, and after you get the first value of I, after you've gotten the value, now when we pass I, it now increments I. So it's called post increments. That's how they call it, post increments. So as well as what we could do is plus 2. Okay, so this actually means here that I is going to be incremented by 2. Okay, so we are just going to see some example of that. So let's go back to our post increment. So now we're going to print the value of names, and we're going to get into okay, fruits, sorry, fruits, and then so let's try to execute this and see what it gives. We're going to have an example to the dart. Oh, I think I just forgot to add dart in front here. Okay, so you see we get that down printed to the console. So we have apple, grape, orange, and mango, right? Now, I talked about like you don't necessarily need to increment by 1, right? You could still go ahead and say, okay, I want to increment by 2. Okay, sorry. So you say you want to increment by 2, and if we redo that, then we have just apple and orange printed to the console, right? So normal. We started here at 0. Okay, at index 0. Remember, index arrays are 0 based, right? So 0 based or index based, right? So we start here at the index of 0, right? We get here to 1. Nope. We first of all print the first one, then now when we get to the second one, we are at 2, right? Because we've incremented I by 2, and then we get now the I printed. So now we check here if the I is still less than the fruits dot length. Okay, yeah, it's still less than the fruit dot length, but we have already achieved our condition. So it goes again. Yes, it's true. So it goes again to the I plus 2, which is now here way above, right? Now it's now at 4. Okay, so we now exit the loop because this array here is not up to 4. Okay, so there's that for that. I hope you kind of like get me what I was trying to explain, right? So maybe if you didn't get, let me start back. So we're starting at index 0, right, which is at apple at index 0. So we check our condition. Is 0 less than fruits the length, which obviously if we were to count this, then we're going to get 4 as the length of these fruits, right? Because where we want to count, we count as from 1, but when we want to get their indices, okay, we start as from 0. So you shouldn't be confused on that. So that's why we're checking, okay, 0 is less than 4, true, right? Now we now get into this part here where we print apple for the first time, and after this execution here, or this print statement has executed, we now go to this increment condition and we increment it by 2. So now we are now at I is equals to 2, right? So we now check again, is 2 less than 4? True. We now get to print orange, which is at index 2. Remember I said arrays are index based, right? And after this has been printed, we add again 2 to I, to the previous value of I, which was 2, right? So now I is 4. Okay, now we check, is 4 less than 4? Right? So that is false. Okay, we don't get to print again anything there, and that's why we just exit the loop. So kind of like do that slowly so you could understand actually what was going on. Okay, so we just going to bring this here, and let's try something else again. Okay, so now we have seen how we can print a loop forward, and because if I bring this here, let me restore back the previous version which was there. Let me put it here, and let's do a post increment of that. Okay, and if we get that, okay, we see here, let me just bring this a little bit up so you can see properly. Or let me clear my terminal first so we don't get too much stuff being printed in the terminal. Yeah, so as you can see, for the first case we have apple, grape, orange and mango, right? Now say we wanted to reverse, right? Say we wanted to start from the end of this, right? Now how then are we going to go about it? Well, we'll have to do some little bit of mental gymnastic, right? So but it's nothing complex. Okay, so we'll first of all start with the condition, a starting condition, which we're going to say, okay, so we want to start from the last or from the end of the array going backwards, right? So we're going to say names dot length. Okay, I don't know why I keep going with names dot length. So we're going to say fruits dot length. Okay, -1. Now let me first of all finish writing the code, then I'm going to explain what I'm actually doing. Okay, so we're going to say here now that I, as long as I is greater than equals to 0, keep doing your work. And now here we're not going to be doing a post increment, but we're going to be doing a post decrement. Okay, means we will be decrementing the value by 1 at every time. So, and then here down here we're just going to get the value printed saying fruits. Okay, fruits of I, something like this. Okay, so what are we doing here? We're saying that, okay, this variable I is starting at fruits dot length -1. Remember we said indices or arrays or lists are counted, if you want to get this last value, okay, it's fruits -1. Okay, it's fruits -1 if you want to get this last value. But now what we're actually doing here is that we are starting, so if in order for us to be able to start from here, we need to get the index of the last element, because that's how we basically can access the last element in an array or in a list, right? We use the array's name dot length -1. That's giving us the last index, because remember I said when we are counting, okay, if we are to count, right, we'll start counting from 1 and above to where the list ends. But if we are taking index or the index, or if we are starting from the index, indexes are 0 based. They start from 0. Okay, so we will start from 0, 1, 2 and 3. So if we get a length and -1, that's 4 minus 1, which is actually 3, right? So we're actually saying that these are okay, yeah, this is it. So we're actually saying here this value of I starting at 3, right? And now the stopping condition says as long as I is greater than 0, that's as long as 3 is greater than or equals to 0, keep executing, and after every iteration or every loop, okay, decrement by 1, that's subtract 1 from it. So that means the first time I is going to be 3, the second time is going to be 2, this last time is going to be 1, okay, and now I think it's the fourth time, right? I is going to be 0. But remember our stopping condition. Now you usually expect that it should stop at 0, but no. Our condition is that as long as I is greater than or equals to 0. We didn't just say if it was greater than, okay, we added if it was equals to. So 0 is equals to 0, right? So that's true. So it's going to execute. But now for the fifth time, we're not going to have -1, right? And -1 is not greater than or equals to 0. So it's going to be a false, and then we exit out of the loop. So that was basically that. So if we can do a quick execution of example 2, okay, so we are going to and let me also show you the list here so we can see that. So you see, we start from mango, orange, grape, and apple. So basically the list has been, we have been able to reverse that. Okay, so I talked about incrementing the post increment, the increment by 2, trying to reverse going forward. So yeah, so that's that. So let's dive into example 3, the third, and here we're going to be talking about the modern for loops. Okay, so now what you need to know, or let me just first of all remove this down here. Now, so what you need to know about the modern for loops is that with modern for loops, right, you lose access to the index, right? But you can still create a scenario where you still have you still get access to the index, but once it won't be that necessary, because with the for loops, right, you get the elements directly. So let's say, let me still get this fruits array here from example 2. We're going to be using it a lot. So we go ahead and create a main function, paste that in here. Okay, so we now say, so now the way we write this modern for loops is that we still use the for keyword, right? Now we say final. Okay, final 2 is a keyword, and the name, let's say for example we have here we have an array or a list of fruits, so we're going to say fruits, okay, singular, and we're going to say in fruits, okay, and then we still provide curly braces. Now we say fruits in fruits, right? That's what I was saying, it's kind of like a modern way. So it's behind the scenes, it's a for loop, or if I could put it like that, behind the scenes it's a kind of for loop execution, but in which we don't get to provide or we get to lose access to the index. Okay, we won't be able to say again, okay, I is equals to 0, is equals to 1, and obviously also we don't have a stopping condition here, right? We can like manually provide a stopping condition. Okay, so these are just some of the differences should the case you want to be able to use the traditional for loop to maybe manually provide the stopping conditions or something like that, right? So but we just have the final fruit, so it's just like we're able to extract each element, or each element at a specific index directly without needing to provide the index. So I guess you kind of like get me, but let's go ahead and just maybe put that by in the code and let's see what it gets. So what it gives, right? So I'm just going to bring this a little bit up and say dart.example3, okay, and we get to execute that, and then we see we get apple, grape, orange, and mango, all of that being printed to the console, right? So that is that, or this is it, right, being printed at the console. Okay, so that's that for the model for loops. Okay, so if we could now go ahead maybe and let me bring back the print statement. Now we could also go ahead and try to combine this with the for loop, right? We could go ahead and not the for loop. We go ahead to try to combine this with the if loop, right? If loop. So let's say we have that with say if, and we could do something like if fruit, okay, that starts with, okay, let's say we for example wanted to say, okay, if there is something here that starts with letter O, okay, just don't do anything, okay, don't do anything, but we'll have an else case, all right, and in the else case we just print the fruit, okay, we just print the fruit, right? So if we clear this out and let me bring this up a little bit up, we try to run that, say example 3, okay, we get here just apple, grape, and mango, meaning that orange has been skipped, right? Orange has literally been skipped for that. So, and yeah, there might be some cases in which you will want to do something like that, all right? So, but now this is one way of doing it, okay, that's one way of doing it. Say we wanted to optimize this more, okay, say this is we wanted to optimize this more. So now if we want to optimize this more, we could just go ahead and eliminate the else. We could just go ahead and just eliminate the else. So what do I basically mean by that? Okay, let me move this out, and let's say what am I going to do here? Okay, so let's just bring this print statement here, okay, and paste that here, and okay, let me provide a more optimal way of doing this. So an optimal way would have just been to eliminate the else block. Okay, so we will still have this, but we'll remove this part, okay. Let's just come and print here, so print fruits, okay, and here we will, now what we're going to say here is this. So as long as the fruits that we're getting from this fruits array or list doesn't start with O, okay, keep printing. So this is like a more optimal way, okay. So if we try to run that, okay, if we say that example 3, I will check the last example, okay, we still get apple, grape, and mango, which is same as the previous, right? So that's that. But now another way we could also kind of like should I say way more further optimize again would be to use the keyword continue, right? Would be to use the keyword continue. Now what continue does is that it looks at your loop, right, and says like, okay, if it meets a certain condition and then use at what was supposed to be executed is continue, right? So it's going to jump out, so it's not going to look at the rest of the code that's below it. It's just going to go back to the top of the loop, right? It's just going to go back to the loop itself and just executes until maybe that condition is met again, then it goes back again to the top. So so let me just put that down so we can basically better understand what is going on, right? So let's type that down. Let me call this again here, okay. So we're going to put that in here, and then okay, so we are going to bring this for loop again, okay, bring that in here. So basically what we'll now do is that we're not going to make use of the continue keyword, so we're just going to say here that continue, and then Outside of the continue, we just print fruits, if I can spell. Okay, so we just get to print fruit, and basically it's still the same thing as the two previous example, but just that here we're making use of the continue keyword. So basically if it gets any fruit that starts with 0 or with O, it's just going to continue. Now the continue here just means it's not going to come and execute this, it's just going to go back here. Sorry about that. It's just going to come back here. Okay, it's just going to come back here at the top. So that's that. So let's run that and let's try to see what is going to what's going to happen. Okay, so that example 3. Okay, yeah, so you basically see it's the same thing, so nothing has changed. Right now, say we wanted maybe in a particular case now not continue the loop but break out of the loop. Now to break out of the loop, I'm sure maybe you're familiar with that, but we can use the break keyword, right? So the break keyword is just there to tell us to break out of the loop. And now once we break out of the loop, we won't get the chance like with continue to be able to execute the next part, right? We won't get that option. So let's just go ahead and call it first so you can understand what is actually going on. So let me copy this, paste that in here. So we are not going to say if it starts with that. Okay, let's break. Okay, so if there's any fruit that starts with O, we're going to break, right? So that's that. Let's now go ahead with it. I should print that here at the console. So let's clear and say that example 3. Now we see that the difference with continue is that we got mango in the previous example when we use continue here, right? Or in the previous examples as the previous 3, we see that we had mango being printed as the last shall I say element because it didn't start with O, right? So the loop continued its execution, right? But here we can actually see that in the last place that it was actually skipped, right? It was actually skipped. So we see that we just had apple and grape. In this last example, we just have apple and grape just being printed in our terminal, right? So that's that. So that means actually when it printed this, and it got here, it stopped the execution of the loop. So there was no need to continue printing because we had already said that okay, we can just do that, right? So that was that. So that was that for that. Okay, so now we are going to also say we wanted to, for example, reverse a loop, right? Say we wanted to, for example, reverse the loop using the modern loop, right? Because we have seen how we could reverse a loop using the traditional for loop, right? We have seen how we could do that using the traditional for loop, but say now that we also wanted to be able to do that using the modern for loop. So what is actually going to, how are we then actually going to do that? So let me bring this out. Okay, let's copy this and put it in here, and here we're not going to use any of these, we're just going to go ahead and print. But now to be able to do that, that has something called reversed, right? So it even already went ahead and appeared on reverse, so we just reverse, right? So if we reverse, then we can be able to print from the last element going downward. So it's almost like doing what we're doing with the for loop, right? Printing backwards. Okay, so let's execute that and then let's see what is going to happen. So if I bring down my terminal, if we clear first, okay, if I try to clear and I say example 3, okay, and I press enter, ta-da! So you see we get it starting from mango, orange, and then grape, and then we get the apple being printed, right? So that's that. That's how then we go about doing that. Okay, so that, I think that's enough for example. I think that's enough for example. That's example 3. Okay, so now we're going to go with example 4, right, to be able to do that. So let's go then with example 4. Okay, so we now bring this down, say example 4. So example 4 dot dart. Okay, so example 4 dot dart, so we can put that in here. Okay, so now example 4 dot dart, we're going to be talking about the while loop. Okay, now in this while loop, right, in this while loop we're going to be talking about how then we can use it. So let's go back to example 3 and copy that array again. Let's get this. Okay, copy it, paste this down here. So what we're going to do here is that a while loop is a loop that evaluates a condition, right? Just a condition, and if that condition is met, right, execution continues, otherwise the execution stops, right? So let me cut this. So let's say main. Okay, put that in here. Okay, so okay, so how then do we do the while loop? So we say while, okay, while a certain condition, and with the while loop we need to have okay, let me just go ahead and just, now with the while loop we need to have something like a counter, right, that will be able to tell the loop when to stop. Because if we don't do something like this, or if we don't do something like that, then we're going to have also an endless loop which is going to execute, because obviously we don't have a stopping condition, right? So we're basically telling it to keep going. So let me just show you that. So we're going to have a counter, as long as the counter is less than the fruits dot length. Okay, so as long as it's in the fruits dot length, okay, we want to come and print fruit. Okay, so we want to come and print sorry about that. I want to come and print fruits dot counter, right? So counter, let me remove this. So this is it. So as long as the counter is less than the fruits dot length, then we want to print the fruits. But now this is what is going to happen if we don't provide like a way to increment the if we don't provide a way to increment the counter, because if we don't do that, then we're going to fall into an endless loop, right? We're going to fall into an endless loop. So this is it. So if we say that example 4, it's example 4, so you see we get it printed forever. So let me stop that before. So that's simply because we haven't provided a stopping condition, right? So but now let's go ahead then now and provide stopping condition. A stopping condition is that we now need to increment the counter by 1. Okay, so until the condition where the counter is now greater than the length, then the loop now is going to be exited. Okay, so that's that. So with this, if I clear here, okay, if I clear here and I say that's example 4, then we see now that we don't get this, we don't get that endless loop again. So This is one way of incrementing it. The other way we could do is by incrementing directly here, right? It's still going to do the same thing, right? Where here it is, right? But now the difference with this is that immediately as we are printing the first element, right, out of this list, right, immediately as we print that, we increment now by 1. So we start with 0. What is at 0? When once we print apple, we will now increment by 1. Okay, we now increment by 1, and now from 0 we go to 1, and so on and so forth, to 2 to 3 and 4, right? So that's that for that. So you can increment in either ways, right, by putting it down here or up here directly. Okay, so it's still valid. So the next thing we are going to maybe want to talk about is, okay, so how then do we also reverse with a while loop, right? How then do we also reverse with a while loop? So I'm still going to leave that here. I'm going to provide say something like counter 2. Okay, so we should know that it's different. Start from here. Okay, and now we're going to say while. Okay, while the counter plus plus. Okay, now we're going to be using a post increment counter 2 is less than fruits.length. Okay, then we are going to now just go ahead and just print fruits, fruits with counter 2, not counter 2 increment, but just with counter 2. Okay, so I think let's divide that again so we get to see the different parts. Okay, so if we come down here, we clear this, and then we say this example 4. Okay, so this is surprising, this didn't reverse. Oh, okay, yeah, yes, normally. So let me just explain kind of like what is happening here. Oh, this is not even actually to reverse. This like could be another way to actually do it, right? If we were to start maybe with the negative, if we were to use a post increment, actually I think for my notes I kind of like cut it wrongly. So this is another way of like using the post increments, and this is another way of doing the pre increments, right? Still doing this using the pre increment, and then we still get it. So we start from 0, from -1. We first of all increment, right, which is now at 0. Okay, and then now we get the value here. Now we check if 0 is less than fruits.length, right, which is true, which because this is 4, and then we get the fruits now at index 0, and so on and so forth. So yeah, so that's that for that. So now let's go to example 5. Okay, let's just do it here. Yeah, let's just do it here. So there are also cases where we might want to want to execute the body first before we check the condition, because remember with the while loop we're checking the condition first before executing the body. But now we can be able to achieve that using the do while. Let me bring this out. We can be able to achieve that using the do while loop. So this is the syntax. Okay, it's do, and then we have now here let me just put it like this, our body, and then here now we now have the while, okay, with the condition here. So with our condition here, so we are still going to use that array and say counter, as long as the let's say counter 3. Okay, as long as the counter 3 is less than fruits.length. Okay, so we haven't yet created the counter 3, so I'm just going to go ahead and say counter 3, not starting at some 0. Okay, now in this body we're still going to do the same thing, nothing really fancy, but just fruits taking us at counter 3, right? Now like I said, right, we could still do an increment like this, or we could break it out, right, provide a separate counter 3 plus plus, something like this. which will still give us the same. So if we did this example 4, okay, we still get the apple, grape, orange, and mango. So yeah, hope you kind of like get that. So that's that. Um so that's that for the do while loop. So the condition here gets executed first before we check. Not the condition, the body gets executed first before we check for the condition. So I don't know if you kind of like get, but that's how the while loop behaves, right? So it checks for the body, then now it kind of like executes then what's supposed to be next, right? So you can go ahead and try some pretty much examples during your free time to try to get more understanding of this the while loops, check of stuffs. Yeah. So in cases where you want to execute your body before checking the condition, then make sure to use the do while loop. So and now let's go into example 5. Okay. Example 5 dot dart. Okay. So we're going to have this here and close this now. Now in example 5 dot dart, we're going to be talking about switch statements. Okay, so basically, why switch statements? So with switch statements, they're also a type of way that we can control the flow of our application, right? So let me just go ahead and they control the flow of the application based on a certain case. So they control that based on a certain case. So right, so let me just go ahead and let's just try to do that. So I'm going to provide a function here that's going to say describe a data type. So we are going to make it generic. We haven't yet talked about generic, but we're going to see that. Okay, values. Okay, so we're going to switch. Okay, now we're going to switch on the value or on t, right? Because we actually said this value that we're going to be inputting here will have a certain t, right? So because we want to switch on the data type, not on the value itself, right? So we want to be able to switch on the data type. So we're going to put the t here. Okay, I'm going to say case. Now the way you write switches is that you start with the case, right? You go with the case. So if you get to say case something, right? Let me just say something, the colon, and then you break, right? Semicolon. Case, let me put it like this, case something underscore, let's say else, right? If I can spell else. Okay, and then break again. So this is how basically you write your cases, right? So we're just going to go and say an int. Okay, and we're going to print this is an integer. Okay, then we're going to break. Then we're going to say case. So we're just going to go for some couple of cases. I'm not going to cover everything, so I don't want to spend the rest of the video typing everything here. So case, this is a double, right? And then we break. And then the last case we're going to cover is let's say map. Okay, of string comma string, and then we're going to say print this is a map of type string, and then we're going to break. And now we have a default. Now the default here is that should in case all our cases are not covered, right, or maybe there's something we forgot to cover, right, it's the print is going to jump here. Okay, the switch case is going to jump here. So this is, we could just say this is something else. Okay, so we could say this is something else. All right, so that's that for that. So I forgot to put this down. So basically this is it. This is what a switch case does. Nothing much, nothing fancy, but it just does but this. So we could bring our describe data type here, and so we could pass that with 1. Okay, and I could duplicate this a couple of times and say this, and could do something like this, say for example key and then value, and then let's say for example for the last one I provided something like a string, like so, like this is a string, right? So if we try then to clear a console, I will say that example 5. Okay, so you see we get a couple of everything being switched on. So for the first one, which is an integer, of course we get this is an integer, this is a map, and stuffs like that. Okay, so okay, look guys, yeah, so basically what I was trying to say is that we have now covered that. Okay, so you see that in the case of an integer here, we got this is an integer, likewise double, string, okay, and then something else because we didn't cover this case, right? But it's always a good practice to try to cover all your possible cases as much as possible when working with switch cases. Okay, so we have come to the end of the course, and I really thank you very much for the end of this chapter. Okay, I really thank you very much for your time, and I hope you did enjoy the lesson and get to learn a lot. Okay, so stay tuned to the next coming chapter, which will be on records. Okay, so a feature newly added to Dart. Okay, so we are going, I think it was that point 3 and above. So that point 3, so we are now going to be working now going to see how we can work with records and what are they all about and so on and so forth. Okay, so thank you, and yeah, don't forget to like, subscribe and share.